Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for the Voice of Leadership and for Dr. Karen Speaks Leadership. And today I want to revisit the subject of resilience. And although I talked about agility and resilience recently, this episode is about the mindset of resilience, which you will need in order to be successful in life and in order to be successful, being resilient, which is the ability to go through something very challenging, very difficult, and not only to bounce back, as I say, also to bounce forward and get to an even better place. So I want to share several mindset approaches to have in mind in order to be successful. And some of these we have talked about before in the past. However, given what's going on in our world and what likely may be going on in your life, we can never hear too much about the mindset of resilience. So, the first thing I want to mention is that no matter what happens to you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, have the mindset that says, everything is for me. Now, you might think I'm crazy because how can everything be for you when some things are horrific and horrible? And indeed, there are circumstances in our lives, there are events in our lives that really are horrible events. And if you will choose to look through the lens of what does this mean? What can I gain from this? What is God showing me through this experience rather than to get stuck in why is this happening? Rarely do we really understand the why of difficult and challenging scenarios. However, we can answer the what I am learning or what do I see. And I'm thinking about Joseph in the Bible when he had been sold into slavery by his brothers. That was a horrible circumstance, an event to be sold into slavery. And sold into slavery in Egypt is where he was. And then he was falsely accused of a crime that he didn't commit. And so then he was put in prison, which he didn't deserve. Now imagine, here you are, Joseph, you've had these dreams from childhood that you're going to be this great person, and even your mother and father and siblings would bow down to you. And now you're a slave. Now you are in prison. It probably didn't seem to add up. But what was interesting is Joseph continued to trust in God no matter what his circumstances were. And he thrived, and God gave him favor in every place where he was. So when he was in the house of Potiphar, enslaved there, but he was in charge of the whole house, God gave him favor. When he ended up in prison, he had favor in the prison. And when he might have thought that the tide was turning and that one of the people on the king's staff would be able to go back and tell the king how Joseph had interpreted a dream for him and then get him out of prison, that one, the butler forgot all about Joseph. And so he's still in prison. Yet we know that God had a plan in all of these circumstances, such that later in his life, when his brothers came from their hometown to Egypt because of the great famine, which God had revealed already to Joseph because of the dreams of the Pharaoh at the time. And finally, the butler remembered him and he came out of prison to both tell the Pharaoh what he had dreamed and also what the meaning of the dream was. So, what we see here is that Joseph later, when talking to his brothers who've come to get food because there's no food in their homeland and their region, he ultimately says to them, once they know who he is, and he invites them to move to Egypt so that they won't starve to death. He says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And we have to keep that perspective that there are many things that happen to us, which there's the evil of the world that's just the condition of the earthen world in a fallen state, the same with people in a fallen state. And those bad events happen to everyone. So we have that. In addition, there are some things that happen because we may not always do things in the best way. So maybe if you lit a candle by your bed and forgot about it and fell asleep, you might cause a fire. And so, of course, there's a learning from that. I know in my house, because I know that I could fall asleep in a minute or be a problem. We don't have candles in our house that you can light. Or if they are lightable, we never light them for that very reason. I already know that for me, that would be a risk factor. So we prefer to have candles that are battery operated or electric in some sense. So if you leave it on, nothing bad is going to happen in that case. So there are times when some things are happening to us because of our own choices and decisions. And many times it has nothing to do with us. It's just what's out there in the environment. Yet, if you would maintain the mindset and attitude of, what can I do with this event? What can I learn? How can I grow? How can I move forward in the midst of it? You will discover that you will find what the messages are in the event. And sometimes those events are specifically, such as in Joseph's case, ordained and situated by God for his purposes. And in this case, to save all of the household of Abraham in the famine. So that's what we're really looking at in this case. So that's number one. Have the mindset that everything is for me. Number two, have the mindset that there is a way through the crisis to the other side, even if you can't see the how of it right now. You may have no idea how to get from where you are through the crisis to the other side to safety. Yet there is a way, and you want to maintain the mindset that there is a way. And just imagine when the children of God were fleeing out of Egypt and out of their enslaved state, and they're in the wilderness and they come to the Red Sea, and behind them, the Egyptians are in hot pursuit. They don't know how they're going to get across that Red Sea. They have no idea. In fact, they're frightened to death. Yet, God makes a way, opens the sea, causes the seabed to be dry ground, and allows them to walk from one side to the other with the waters receded, the ground dry, and after they get over safely, all of them, then God closes up the sea again, and that's when the Egyptians are drowned in the Red Sea because they would not let God's people go. And so this was the consequence for their resistance to God's plan at the time. So God knew how to get them across the Red Sea. They didn't know how to get across the Red Sea or how God would do it. However, they had to trust him that he would do it. And though they were afraid and many doubted, God did get them across. The same thing happened when later they had to cross the Jordan. At least by this time, though the children of those who had crossed the Red Sea were living, they didn't see the Red Sea crossing, most of them themselves. And so now this is their first time to see God part the waters. And this time it was the waters of the Jordan so that they could walk across on safety to get to the promised land. Again, keep the mindset that there is a way, even if you don't know it, even if you can't see it, there is a way. And when you have the mindset that there is a way, though you don't know it now, though you don't see it now, you're more likely to see it because you know that there is a way and you're looking for it, you're listening out for it. And then number three, have the mindset that I or we, if it's your whole community, we can rebuild. And I want you to remember it and think about across the world and the United States and other parts of the globe, many people have had to cover from floods and hurricanes and fires. They may have lost their entire home and all of their earthly possessions in one of these crises, one of these floods or fires. And yet, though they may not exactly have the same kind of home that they had before, they can rebuild. They can get a new home and a new shelter in time. And so you have to remember that though what you had is gone, you can rebuild. And I know that when the children of God were rebuilding the temple after it had been destroyed, and they built the second temple, it was nowhere near as glorious as the first temple that they had under King Solomon. And yet it was still a temple of God, a place where they could worship him, and they rejoiced and they had a celebration because God had allowed them to build a second temple. And you want to keep in mind, even if that house is not the same as the first, you have shelter from the elements and you are indoors rather than outdoors. So just remember, I can and we can rebuild. Also, I know there were a lot of people and some that I knew personally who, coming through the pandemic, they had lost jobs or they may have been entrepreneurs and they had lost businesses that they would never rebuild again. And what God allowed them to do was to start something new, something different, maybe that they hadn't done prior to the pandemic, something that was a new venture using their same abilities and skills and gifts which God had already given them. Or perhaps the old job, even though it's gone, they got a new job. So that is, we can rebuild. We may not rebuild the same thing, yet we can rebuild. And then number 4, the future can be better than the past. The future can be better than the past. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people who have lost jobs and they're distraught when they're in the midst of losing those jobs. And then you see them months later, years later, and they're in a new position and a new post, and they'll say, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm finally doing what I've always wanted to do, or I'm having an opportunity I never would have dreamed of. So, though the job loss was really excruciating and difficult, and there were tears, and there was pain, and there was anger, and there was upset, on the back end of it, they find themselves in a much better place. So, what I'm saying is that not only might you bounce back, you might bounce forward to a better place, a better job situation than what you had before. So people can move from the sky is falling and I don't know what I'm going to do to the best ever in their lives, to the best ever. So look for it. Say, even though what I had in the past has been destroyed by the hurricane, the flood, the fire, by the loss of this job, not only can I rebuild, the future can be even better than anything I've ever experienced in the past. That is a mindset. And when you know and imagine that the future can be better, again, you are open to that possibility and to seeing the open doors and the open windows of how to get there. And then this leads us to number 5, which says, I talk about it as, what do I have in my hand? Because when Moses was wondering, how is he going to appear before Pharaoh? And God says to him, look, I've given you abilities. I've given you tools. And he said, you've got a staff in your hand. Throw it down to the ground. See what happens. It turns into a snake or whatever. And you're going to be able to do miraculous exploits and pursuits with the staff that I'm giving you. And so, what I'm saying is that each of us has already been resourced by God in some way. So, you have some skills, you have some tools, you have relationships that He's put in your hand already. And I want to talk about the relationship one today because sometimes we forget that these key relationships can make a difference in us bouncing forward in our lives. So I'm thinking about Queen Esther. Queen Esther was a Jewish woman. She was in the Persian kingdom as the wife of King Ahasuerus, also known as Xerxes. And King Ahasuerus of Persia was the ruler of a huge kingdom that had these 127 provinces, people from all over the globe, and his kingdom extended from India to Ethiopia. It was vast. And so he ruled this whole area, and his wife was a Jewish woman. So when Haman plotted this plot to kill all the Jewish people, including her cousin Mordecai, well, Haman didn't know that Esther was Jewish, and neither did the king. Of course, Mordecai, being her cousin and her close relative who had raised her and treated her as a daughter along the way, we don't know whatever happened to Esther's parents, but Mordecai was like a father figure, even though he was her cousin. So, what we see here is that Esther was put into the palace for a time such as this, when her people would need to be in a place where they would have favor with key relationships. And the whole book of Esther relates the story of how Esther's relationship with the king and her favor with the king allowed her to intercede for her people and allowed her and Mordecai together to do all the necessary things in order to save the Jewish people from destruction at that time. And so, in our own cases, not only does God give us knowledge and tools in your company, no matter what's going on, you've got knowledge, you have tools, you have resources, you have skills, you have abilities, you have people that God has blessed you with that can help with that pathway forward to bounce forward to a better place. So remember the relationships, and sometimes it can be scary to leverage those relationships. For Queen Esther, it was very frightening because she had to go to the king uncalled for, unbidden, and she hadn't been called for more than 30 days. And if you go to the king unbidden, the rule was that you would be put to death unless the king held out the golden scepter to you. So it was a risk for her to go without being called. And yet she took the risk. And she said, if I perish, I perish. And we know the story that indeed when she went in, the king held out the golden scepter to her and asked, what is your petition, my queen? He was happy to see her and to grant her request up to even half the kingdom he was willing to give her. So we don't know how God goes before us and opens the hearts of people and the doors so that those key relationships that he's given us will be beneficial. Now, when people go around with a negative mindset, what I'll call the negative Nelly mindset, if you will, they will not see the beauty and the possibilities all around them. In order to see the beauty, in order to see the possibilities, you have to have eyes that are open and willing to see, ears that are open and that are willing to hear. Just like two people can be walking down the street here in beautiful Colorado and look up at Pikes Peak, where America the Beautiful was written. And when they look, because either they don't look up and see, or they look and still don't see, they don't see the Purple Mountain majesty. They don't see the red rocks that surround us. They don't see the beautiful hues and the sunlight on the mountain. They don't see the colorful flowers, including the wildflowers, all around the city because they don't have eyes to see and ears to hear. They're not looking. They're in a negative mindset that blinds them to the beauty which God has planted all around. So, in order to see what really is here, you have to look and you have to be open to the possibilities. So, what I would say in number 6 is that believing is seeing rather than seeing is believing. If you see it and then you believe it, well, everybody can do that if they choose to. There's no faith required. However, if you have the faith that precedes seeing and the vision, and you exercise that faith and believe first, Oh, what God can do for you. And He will do great and wonderful things for you when you have faith in Him. Faith that He is a good God. Faith that He is faithful to you and to all of His beloved people. And He will come through and show you possibilities that you haven't yet seen. So we want to remember that, yes, believing is seeing. Faith is what precedes the vision. Now, as I'm talking about having faith and looking ahead and seeing what's possible, we know that some of the circumstances that we face have been so horrific that they require a time of mourning. And yes, we must go through that mourning. It's a necessary part of healing, a necessary part of the bouncing forward. Don't skip the mourning, because this is how you get sick in life. You go through the mourning rather than avoid the mourning. We find out in Ecclesiastes, the 3rd chapter, that there is a time for everything. And in that list is also a time for mourning. What you don't do is make that mourning your whole and your entire life. You have a season for it, and then you look up and you move forward in the ways that we are talking about. So I would say that number 7 would be to maintain an attitude of gratitude and positivity about the future. And even if your whole house burns down, even if you sustain many losses, including losses of loved ones, there is always something to be thankful for. Even if you are in a concentration camp, even if you are enslaved on a southern plantation in the United States, from back in the day, both of those pictures are from back in the day, people found something for which to be thankful. And Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, talks about the kind of mindset that it takes to be in the concentration camp and to live to see another day. And every little kindness that may be shown to you, or every way you escape, is something to be thankful for. I remember one of the Holocaust survivors and person in the concentration camp who was a Christian person, but she and her family had helped many Jewish people to be hidden and to be saved through the crisis. She said that even having lice was a blessing, because the assaults that the guards might have, the sexual assaults on the women, they escaped some of them because they had lice. So there's always a different way to look at what you are going through and to maintain this attitude of gratitude. And keep in mind that if you are still here, you still have a purpose to fulfill, and you want to seek to fulfill that purpose. And when you have a thankful attitude in your life, in your family, in your company, in your business, that thankful attitude is contagious and it's inspiring to other people. And likewise, if you go into the workplace with the negative Nelly attitude, that's also contagious. And not only will you be blind to possibilities, your people will also be blind to the possibilities that God is actually building for you. So I would say thankfulness is huge. Find something for which to be thankful, even in the most dire of circumstances, even if it's nothing except to say, I still have my life, even if I survived only by the skin of my teeth. Be thankful to still be here. Be thankful that God still has a purpose for you, even as you've gone through challenge and difficulty. So I think the overarching perspective in everything that I've been talking about is this ability to look with anticipation for the way forward. And this is something you do on purpose and intentionally. So what are you doing intentionally? You're number one, saying everything is for me, and you're looking for how it's for you. Number two, there is a way through the crisis. In other words, I'm going to get through it to the other side. Number three, I and we can rebuild. Maybe different what we rebuild. We can rebuild. Number four, the future can be better than the past. You can build something greater. And number five, I have resources. I have skills, abilities, people, relationships in my hand. Not only do I have resources, let me add a piece, and I can get more. We serve an abundant God who's come to bless us with the abundant life. And even Job, when he lost all of his children, he lost his health, he lost his possessions, his cattle, God restored all to him and even more. So we want to know that not only do we have resources, we can also get more. And number six, to be able to say, I believe and I will see again and now and still the goodness of God. Being able to believe that, believing in the goodness of God, having that faith where believing is seeing. That's important. And then number seven, the attitude of gratitude and positivity. I am thankful and know that God will see me through these circumstances. So Psalm 106 is what I'd like to read in our closing time today. Psalm 106 verses 1 through 5. And it says, praise the Lord. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. Who can utter the mighty acts of the Lord? Who can declare all his praise? Blessed are those who keep justice, and he who does righteousness at all times. Remember me, O Lord, with the favor you have toward your people. Oh, visit me with your salvation, that I may see the benefit of your chosen ones, that I may rejoice in the gladness of your nation, that I may glory with your inheritance. So we see here that this psalm starts with praise the Lord. And let us start each day with praise the Lord. Let us start each day with, oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endures forever. And we know that his mighty acts are so numerous, we can't even name them all. We can't even remember them all. That's the kind of God that we serve. And we ask him to remember us, to show favor on us, and to visit us with his salvation in whatever our dilemma is. And sometimes the challenges and hardships that we go through are to remind us that we even need salvation from God. In and of ourselves, we don't know enough. We don't see enough. We don't have power enough in and of ourselves to resolve all of the challenges and difficulties. So we want to seek God's face and be covered by his salvation in every circumstance. So I pray for you today, a blessed day, as you are resilient and bouncing forward even to a better place. Taking these mindset approaches with you every day, no matter what circumstance you're in, because God will see you through and he can build for you a better future than whatever you had in the past. Thank you and see you next time. Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, President and CEO of Trans Leadership Incorporated. Did you know that workplaces can make a significant difference in the lives of people and that you can create a positive culture that gets positive business results and also produces positive life experiences for your employees and your clients and customers? You can make a significant contribution to the world by creating the kind of culture where your people can bring their gifts to provide the most relevant and excellent products and services to your marketplace. What the research shows is that companies with excellent leadership are also more profitable. So as you flourish and as you grow in the world, you can do more for yourself as well as for others. So if this is resonating with you and you want to create a positive, profitable, and powerful corporate culture, and you care about succession, leaving the organization in a better position than when you found it, do keep in mind that that kind of legacy is something that's intentional. And I am happy to partner with you to take your organization to the next level and create that positive leadership culture. So reach me at Dr. Karen, Karen, at transleadership.com. You've been listening to The Voice of Leadership with me, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks. And I want to give a special thanks to jazz saxophonist Ron McMillan for granting us permission to use his gifted music on our show. Thanks for listening, and remember to go to my website, transleadership.com, for more strategies, insights, and leadership resources.